Women's Equality Day is an official holiday in the United States observed on August 26 to commemorate the day in 1920 when the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote was ratified. Since 1971, the day has been observed to remember the suffragists and their efforts, as well as other issues concerning women's rights. The American women's movement began in 1848, when Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretius Mott met in New York to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions and rights of women at the Seneca Falls Convention. The Seneca Falls Convention was America's first women's convention, attended by women leaders and abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass. Women leaders created a document, the Declaration of Sentiments, modeled after the United States Declaration that included 12 resolutions about women's rights, obligations, and privileges in American society. 11 of the 12 resolutions were easily passed, but the one on women's suffrage became contentious. The National Women's Rights Convention was established in 1850 as a national convention for the formal consideration of women's rights. Equal wages, educational rights, property rights, marriage reform, and suffrage were all discussed over the next decade. The National Women's Rights Convention came to an end at the height of the Civil War. Women's rights activists concentrated on abolition and emancipation issues. In 1866, abolitionists Lucy Stone and suffragist Susan B. Anthony proposed the formation of an organization to serve the ideals of women of all races and faiths. As a result, the American Equal Rights Association was founded, with co-founders Lucy Stone, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Sarah Parker Remond, and Frederick Douglass. Both Stanton and Anthony were disappointed that the 15th Amendment, which granted free men of color the right to vote, did not extend to women. Stanton and Anthony founded the National Woman Suffrage Association, NWSA, in 1869 to specifically secure women's suffrage. Abolitionists Lucy Stone, Henry Blackwell, and Julia Ward Howe, on the other hand, founded an alternative organization, the American Woman Suffrage Association, because they believed that women's voting rights should be consistent with black suffrage. The National American Woman Suffrage Association, NASA, was founded in 1890 as a result of the merger of the NWSA and AWSA. The national struggle for women's suffrage was strengthened by the establishment of NASA. In order to persuade Congress to accept a federal amendment, women worked with this organization to ratify state suffrage amendments. As a result, between 1869 and 1896, states including Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho gave women the right to vote. A new generation of suffragists, including Stanton's daughter Harriet Stanton Bloch, emerged around the start of the 20th century. Bloch spent time in England as a member of the British women's movement, along with Alice Paul. Through the suffrage procession, their experiences and protest strategies were eventually adopted in the United States. When Alice Paul and Lucy Burns broke away from the NASA in 1913, they founded the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage. It was eventually renamed the National Woman's Party, and it campaigned for constitutional amendments to grant women the right to vote. The NWP ladies only attracted public and legislative attention when U.S. President Woodrow Wilson refused to listen to the protesters' requests. Despite their safety and health, several women were imprisoned and went on hunger strikes. President Wilson encouraged Congress to enact the amendment in December 1916 after winning public support. The federal suffrage amendment was ratified by the House of Representatives in May 1919. Finally, on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote was ratified. Both NASA and NWP were recognized with winning the women's campaign. Aside from the right to vote, the 19th Amendment granted women the right to buy and possess land, serve on juries, and make decisions about marriage, career, and even childbearing. Overall, it recognized women as members of society capable of making critical decisions on their own. The amendment was the result of generations of suffragist action that began in 1848. Despite the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which grants equal rights to all women in the United States, African American women were denied the ability to vote until the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. On the 50th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, women from the National Organization of Women conducted massive rallies and marches in American cities and placed banners on the Statue of Liberty to honor the women who made voting possible. Following the 1970 demonstration, Congress attempted to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, but it was not ratified. Instead, they established Women's Equality Day on August 26 each year to honor the achievements of women throughout American history. In addition to the amendment, the day honors women who worked long hours during World War I while men were fighting on the front lines. To compensate for the loss of men in the labor force, women worked in factories producing ammunition, weapons, supplies, and other items. Women's Equality Day has been observed annually since 1971, following the introduction of Congresswoman Bella Abzug and the passage of a presidential proclamation. In the United States, this day is observed by writing thank you letters to influential women, teaching youngsters about historical female figures, and participating in parades and activities organized by local governments. Wyoming became the first state to offer women the right to vote on December 10, 1869. Clara Barton, a nurse, founded the American Red Cross in 1881. Susanna Madera Salter, the first female mayor of any American town, was elected in Argonne, Kansas, in 1887. In 1902, Martha Washington became the first American woman to feature on a U.S. postage stamp. The first Mother's Day events took place in Philadelphia and Grafton, West Virginia in 1908. Charlotte Woodward was the only original suffragette who saw women gain the right to vote in 1920. In 1921, American novelist Edith Wharton became the first woman to receive the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for her novel The Age of Innocence. Gertrude Aderly was the first woman to swim across the English Channel in 1926. Hattie Caraway was the first woman elected to the Senate in 1932. In 1935, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic and the first aviator to fly solo across the Pacific Ocean. President Franklin D. Roosevelt named the first female cabinet member in 1933. Frances Perkins served as Labor Secretary. The Equal Pay Act, passed in 1963, prohibited sex-based salary discrimination for both men and women. In 1975, women were allowed to enlist at U.S. military schools for the first time. The National Museum of Women in the Arts opened in Washington, D.C. in 1987, the same year that Women's History Month was established. Tanya Abibi was also the first American woman and the youngest person to sail solo around the world. Despite American political liberalism, no woman has ever been elected president. Hillary Clinton, former senator and First Lady, became the first woman to be nominated for president by a major political party in 2016.